It was the height of summer in Palm Beach, Florida, and the exclusive Mar-a-Lago Sports Club buzzed with excitement. Every year, the club hosted the Summer Invitational, a tennis tournament that attracted some of the best young players from across the state. Among the competitors this year was Barron Trump, 17, standing at an imposing 6 feet 7 inches and known for his powerful serve and graceful footwork. Barron wasn't particularly fond of the attention his last name brought him, but tennis was different. On the court, it wasn't about politics or fame. It was about skill, strategy, and discipline. Still, the whispers followed him everywhere. "He's only here because of his family," someone muttered as Barron walked past the registration table. "He's too tall for tennis," another said, laughing. "Should have stuck with basketball." Barron tuned them out, as he always did. His coach, a no-nonsense former pro named Carlos, had drilled the importance of focus into him since day one. "Block out the noise," Carlos always said. "The racket does the talking." The first 2 rounds of the tournament went smoothly. Barron dispatched his opponents with a combination of blistering serves and unrelenting baseline rallies. By the end of the second day, he was one of 4 players left standing in the boys' singles bracket, but not everyone was thrilled by his success. "Lucky draw," a voice sneered as Barron packed up his bag after his second match. He turned to see a group of older teens lounging by the courts, clearly not part of the tournament. The leader of the group, a broad-shouldered boy in a tank top, leaned against the fence with a smirk. "Bet you can't handle real competition," the boy said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Barron didn't respond. He slung his bag over his shoulder and started walking toward the clubhouse, but the group followed. "What's the matter, Barron? Too good to talk to us?" the leader taunted. Barron paused, turning to face them. His expression was calm, his blue eyes steady. "Just trying to focus on my game," he said simply. "Your game?" the boy scoffed. "Please, you're only here because of your daddy's money. Everyone knows it." A few heads turned at the comment, and Barron felt the familiar knot of frustration tighten in his chest. But he forced himself to stay composed. "Look," he said, his voice measured, "if you've got a problem, why don't we settle it on the court?" The boy raised an eyebrow, clearly not expecting the challenge. "You want to play me?" he asked, laughing. "Unless you're scared," Barron replied, his tone cool but firm. The crowd around them murmured, intrigued by the brewing confrontation. The boy's smirk faltered, but he recovered quickly. "Fine," he said, grabbing a spare racket from a bench. "Let's see what you've got." Within minutes, a makeshift match was set up on an empty court. Spectators gathered along the sidelines, eager to see what would happen. Carlos stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching silently. The boy introduced himself as Ryan. He had a powerful build and an aggressive playing style, but it was clear from the first few points that he lacked the finesse and consistency of a trained player. Barron, on the other hand, played with calm precision. He used his height to his advantage, dominating the net and sending down serves that Ryan could barely return. 15 love, the umpire called. Then 30 love. 40 love. The game continued in the same vein, with Barron dictating the pace and Ryan struggling to keep up. Sweat poured down Ryan's face as he lunged for a particularly sharp cross-court shot, only to miss it by inches. The crowd erupted in cheers. By the time the match ended, Barron had won 6-1, leaving Ryan red-faced and breathless. Barron walked to the net, extending his hand. For a moment it seemed like Ryan might refuse, but then grudgingly he shook it. "Good game," Barron said sincerely. Ryan muttered something under his breath and stalked off, leaving his racket behind. His friends followed, their earlier bravado replaced with silence. As the crowd began to disperse, Carlos approached Barron, a rare smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Not bad," Carlos said, "but don't let it distract you. You've got a semifinal tomorrow." Barron nodded, slinging his bag over his shoulder. "I know," he said. "Good," Carlos replied. "And for the record, you handled that well. Better than most would have." Barron glanced back at the empty court, then at the retreating figures of Ryan and his friends. "It's just tennis," he said, though the faintest hint of a smile played on his lips. The next day, Barron faced an opponent unlike any he'd encountered in the tournament so far, a wiry, agile player named Diego. Diego was fast, his movements sharp and unpredictable, and he had a knack for turning defense into offense. The match was grueling, each point hard-fought. Barron relied on his serve to gain an edge, but Diego's speed kept him in the game. Barron's first serves were powerful, but Diego seemed to anticipate them, running to the corners of the court with lightning speed. Barron couldn't help but admire his opponent's quickness, but it was frustrating too. No matter how hard he hit the ball, Diego was there, returning everything with precision. By the third set, both players were drenched in sweat, their shirts clinging to their bodies as they skidded on the court, each one desperately trying to outmaneuver the other. The rallies had grown longer, the points more exhausting. Barron's legs ached from the constant movement, his feet slipping on the hard surface as he pushed himself to the limit. Every time he thought he'd broken through Diego's defenses, the ball came back, sharp and fast. The crowd was on edge, their collective breath held after every point, gasping and cheering as the tension built. Barron could hear their excited murmurs, their shouts of encouragement, but it felt distant, muffled. He was locked in a mental battle with Diego, each player pushing his limits, refusing to back down. Even Carlos, who had always been calm and composed on the sidelines, appeared tense. His eyes were fixed on Barron, his posture more rigid than usual, and Barron could see the faintest furrow of worry on his coach's brow. At 5-5 in the final set, Barron found himself facing breakpoint. The stakes couldn't have been higher. He bounced the ball on the court, trying to steady his breathing. The crowd's murmurs felt like a distant hum in his ears. He focused on the weight of the racket in his hand, the rhythmic bounce of the ball, trying to clear his mind of everything else. Diego was ready, crouching low, preparing to rush forward the second Barron made a move. Barron's grip tightened on the racket handle, his knuckles turning white. "Focus," he muttered to himself, feeling the heat of the moment pressing against his chest. He heard Carlos's voice in his head, the same steady words his coach had drilled into him over the past year. "Block out the noise." Barron served. It was an ace, an explosive, near-perfect serve that cut through the air like a missile. Diego didn't even move, his feet frozen in place as he watched the ball sail past him. The crowd erupted into cheers, the sound deafening in Barron's ears. He felt a surge of adrenaline, but he knew he couldn't get distracted now. It was only 1 point, one more point to get through. Barron held steady and won the next game. The scoreboard now read 7-5 in Barron's favor. He had done it. He'd fought his way through, using everything he had to claim his spot in the final. His breathing was still heavy, but there was a sense of quiet satisfaction in the back of his mind. The match had been grueling, but Barron had come through it stronger, more focused. By the time the tournament ended, Barron was holding the trophy, his fingers wrapped around the cold metal as the crowd cheered. There was no one else left on the court, no more competition to face. The victory felt sweet, not just because he had won, but because it was a testament to everything he had worked for. Everything he had put aside to prove to himself, if no one else, that he was more than just his name. As he stood on the podium, the applause ringing in his ears, Barron glanced at Carlos. His coach's rare nod of approval made Barron's chest swell with pride. Carlos had seen his potential from the beginning, but Barron knew that this moment was as much about his coach as it was about him. He had done it together with him. He thought of Ryan, of Diego, and of every whispered comment he'd ignored over the past week. Each one just another obstacle that had helped him grow. In the end, the tournament hadn't been about silencing the critics or proving anything to anyone. It was about proving to himself that he could do it, that he could step out of his father's shadow and carve his own path. In that moment, as the trophy was raised above his head, it wasn't about proving anyone wrong, it was about proving himself right.